Our second objective for today is calculating the angle between two vectors, and similarly to finding the direction angle, we do this all visually. So we have two vectors that are given, vector v and vector w, and I'm going to chart them out on the coordinate plane. So vector v has a vector's component form of -2, +4, so that's going to terminate over in the second quadrant. And then we also have vector w that terminates at -3, -5 down in the third quadrant. And so we're calculating the angle between these two vectors. So you can see very easily that the angle between is going to be this particular angle that I just drew in. How we do that is we kind of separate it just like we did with direction angle. We're going to make some triangles. So the base of that triangle in the second quadrant is -2, and the height is 4. So that theta value inside, I would say tangent of theta equals opposite over adjacent, and then solving for theta, inverse tangent of 4 over -2 is what we're looking at today. And in that particular case, we end up with a negative number, -63.4, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for a triangle, so we absolute value that. And we get 63.4 degrees. So that's just one piece of it. Then we could look at another piece of it down in the third quadrant. We've got another vector that we've drawn. This one has a base this time of -3 and a height, so to speak, of -5. That little theta value inside that triangle we can find by doing tangent of theta equals opposite over adjacent, or inverse tangent is equal to, or inverse tangent of -5 over -3, we're going to get the value 59.0 degrees. We don't have to worry about absolute valuing that one. So the angle between, if I were to add these two things together, our angle between in this particular case, abbreviating a little bit, we're going to add the two together, 63.4 plus the 59.0 degrees. Our angle between these two vectors is 122.4 degrees. Now, an important note to make, especially before we go to the next slide, is that an angle between should never be greater than 180 degrees. If that's the case, then what you probably found was the angle outside, and we want the smaller of the two. So you would need to subtract from 360 to get there. Example 2 for angle between, again, we start by graphing the little vectors in the coordinate planes. So the first one we have is 2, 3. That's the one in the first quadrant. And then the second one that we have is -3, -5 again. And that's going to be over in the third quadrant. It's a little bit more challenging for me to see what the angle between is this time. So I guess just visually, I'm going to take a stab at it, and I think it's going to be this angle over here. So we'll kind of see what to do as we work along. The base of that first vector is 2, and the height is 3. So that theta value inside, I solve for that. Tangent of theta is equal to opposite over adjacent. So theta would be equal to inverse tangent of 3 over 2. Again, when we evaluate that in our calculator, that's going to be 56.3 degrees. Then I'm going to take that vector in the third quadrant and do the same thing. This would be a base of -3 and a depth of -5. And so tangent of theta equals opposite over adjacent. And when we calculate that, inverse tangent of -5 over -3, in my calculator, I get 59.0 degrees. So now I need to start piecing some things together. I know that I'm starting with that little 59 degrees that I just calculated in the purple triangle right here. So 59.0 degrees. And then to that, I'm going to add this entire quadrant, which is 90 degrees. And then I'm going to add this little sliver right here. And that little sliver happens to be the complementary angle for what we found inside the triangle right here. So I'm going to take 90 minus 56.3 and add those all together. When I add those three values together, what I end up with is 182.7 degrees, which, with what we just talked about before, the angle between is never greater than 180 degrees. So what do we need to do? We need to find the other side of this particular angle measure. We just found the angle outside, so we guessed wrong, but that's okay. We don't need to do this all over again. All we need to do is take 360 and subtract the angle outside that we just found. When I do that, I end up with the value 177.3 degrees, which is less than 180, so that's our angle between.